thank you to everybody, as Taz says, to everybody that is here right now. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be hosting the call today, along with Taz Rajabali and Ali, along with some of the members of our team from Melius Consulting. For those that don't know me yet, my name is Hayley. My background is talent acquisition and people. I've been working with Taz for almost 2 years now. And our specialism has been most recently at the Aspire Up program, where we support actually, it's more than just senior leaders now. We kind of support anybody who needs it. When they are, I guess, going through a career transition, trying to implement job search strategy, or perhaps, taking a bit of a leap or a change of direction. But all things job search and career strategy comes under that umbrella, and the Aspire Up program covers it. So with that, we host calls just like this. We invite our lovely guests with expertise to share with you, and hopefully give you some takeaways to implement straight away, to improve job search, as I say, career transitions or interviews. Over the next 45 minutes, we're going to explore some key strategies that you can start implementing. And the idea of the call today is to develop your executive presence and leadership skills, or how to articulate those during an interview. We'll look at specific techniques that you can apply. How do you make a strong impression? We're going to ask Ali to give us some examples and thoughts from his experience, both as a leader that has come through and now as a founder. I'll try not to touch too much on what Ali's doing and leave that to him for his own introduction in just a sec. Next, we'll discuss the importance of deliberate practice. That's the interviewing side, and we'll share our expertise on that. And through real life experiences, Ali will give his advice for best prep practice. Finally, towards the end of the call, I will just quickly cover a downloadable handout that we will share with you following the call, so that you can use that at any time during your job search or interviewing experiences, but that will be there for you to take away. Before we move on and fully lead into Ali's introduction, Taz, can I just hand to you? For those that don't know you, would you give a quick intro to yourself, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Hayley. Hi, everybody. I'm Taz. Thank you, first of all, for being here. It's a joy to run these sessions. We tend to do one a month or so. So thank you for being here. We hope that you get incredible value out of this. I'm the CEO of Melius Consulting. Yeah, that's about it with me, really. I'm based in Dubai, if anybody's interested in that. I know some of the names around this screen, so thanks for being here. And Ali, I'm going to hand over to you, or Hayley, do I hand back to you?
If we can just move on to the next slide, I have a Meet Ali slide. So Ali, please, there is a small blurb on here about you, but if you could talk to that and do your own intro, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Hayley. Thanks, Taz. Thanks, Leah. Thanks, everyone at Melius for having me on. Really, really happy to be here, and nice to meet all of you. So a little bit about me. I'm Ali. I have been in Dubai now for just over 2 years. Sometimes feels like 2 weeks, sometimes feels like 20 years, as anyone who's been here for a period of time will be able to tell you for sure. My background is London born and raised. Fun fact, Taz and I have known each other since he was, I thought you might mention it, but I thought, so Taz and I have actually known each other since I was probably about 4 years old. So our families were friends when we were kids. And we lost touch with each other for the best part of about 20 years and re-met when I got to Dubai. So that's a little bit of a fun fact for my relationship with Taz. And the reason I mentioned that is actually, obviously, London is where we were. My brief snapshot of my professional career. So I started life as an optician. I transitioned from being an optician into becoming a banker. I started at a very junior level, some 20 years ago now. Crikey, I'm older than I thought I was. So about 20 years ago. And I worked my way through the ranks, spent some time in corporate finance, spent some time working for a challenger bank, about 10 years in the UK, and then decided to make the the change in life that came with moving to Dubai. And my wife and I moved to Dubai 2 and a bit years ago. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I also went through the navigation of what is the incredibly competitive landscape of the job market in the UAE, which I don't think is, I don't think it discriminates against anyone in terms of, seniority or position or anything. It is a tough market. But ultimately what that tough market did was led me to a place where I founded with my current business partner about 7-8 months ago, an alternative lending business called Trelling Capital, which 4 weeks ago was in principally approved by the regulator in Dubai. So we now wait for our formal license, and I'm currently the CEO stroke SEO stroke co-founder stroke as many other acronyms and names as I can find of a private credit firm soon to be launched in the DIFC. So thank you for having me.
Congratulations, Ali.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. And very exciting stuff to come. Well, has happened and coming. So I really look forward to hearing much more about it. I actually feel, Ali, I know I mentioned that we'd talk about it today, but I feel like we should have a follow-up call just to talk about you.
Very happy to.
Because I'm very, very invested. As just moving on to the next slide, Ali, you highlighted there that the market does not discriminate, and it has been difficult for anybody to be seen within this market. And I think in my opinion, some of the most impressive leaders that I've worked with and had the pleasure of knowing, often presence is the standout quality. And one of our focuses today will be, how do you show up with leadership presence, even in an interview format? You have a small amount of time to do so. We know impressions are formed within the first 7 to 10 seconds of meeting somebody. So presence will be a theme that runs throughout today. How do you command the room with confidence and clarity, and then build strong leadership presence within an interview so quickly, which builds credibility, competence, and all the while being authentic? So all of these things, I think, is very difficult to do. Even though you may show up with these things every day, putting them in an interview can be difficult. Or if you're on this call, perhaps it is something that that within that transition that you need to learn for your transition. So let's explore it. Let's move on. Before we got on the call today, and when we were preparing this deck, I asked Ali about these things: showcasing vision, balancing humility, and authentic leadership style. So we've included a couple of quotes from him to use going forward. These are your how-tos, Ali, right? So let's talk to this a little. These are your insights. I want the people on the call to take them away. But Ali, it'll be great to kind of bring you in here.
Yeah, of course.
Something that will always come up for discussion in interview presentations is these things. So when it comes to presenting in interviews, or even in high stakes meetings, so if for people on the call are not interviewing right now, but are in high stakes meetings, perhaps new to a leadership position, what advice would you give to other leaders with regards to this?
I think it's a great place to start, actually, Hayley, because often what happens, and I think the fact you use the phrase new to a leadership position is probably quite key here, because we all will at some point in time, no matter what level of seniority you get to, find yourself as potentially the newest leader in a room full of leaders. And I think that can happen to anyone. I think the first, not mistake, but the first kind of challenge I think people have is that when you walk into a room, you almost assume that your presence comes with your voice. And there is this kind of almost innate desire. And don't get me wrong, it comes from a good place, because you're excited about all the new ideas you have. You're excited about all the new things you're going to bring to the table. You've been on the outside looking in. So you have this viewpoint that is far better than anyone else who sat around the table, because you are bringing a completely new, energized vision to it. And often what happens is that that desire to convey that and the desire to sort of get that across to people automatically lands with this desire to speak. And I think one of the things that I learned very early on, and make no mistake, I made this mistake quite a few times in my leadership career as well. And I think one of the things that I learned to do was I just learned to temper myself a little bit. That often what happens is that you can go in with a bunch of great ideas. When you hear what's going on around you and you hear what's going on around the table, those ideas can actually formulate into better ideas. So there is a balance of not necessarily being the, dare I say, the loudest in the room. I'll give a bit of an anecdote that people have heard, but my grandfather used to say to me a lot, everyone's heard the phrase empty vessels make the most noise. And I think what happens is that when you lean into a conversation and you listen and you understand, and then you voice an opinion in that leadership setting, you're always considered to be a leader who has taken a bit more consideration without speaking of an idea. And it's very difficult because people will talk around you and you will automatically feel the need to kind of almost step in. So I guess if I had two things that I would probably say is, listen first. My old boss used to say to me, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that proportion. I needed to hear it at the time that he told me, for sure. And the second thing is just don't be quick to kind of almost want to deliver your opinion as quickly as that. I will caveat all of this with someone, I get the pushback that will probably be, and a lot of my teams used to give pushback and say, but does that not make me look like I'm just not interested? If I sit quietly, does it not make me look meek or vulnerable or not like a leader when I'm allowing people to speak? The key to that is remain interested. Because I think when you look like you glaze over whilst you're listening, it can give the impression. And it's sometimes as simple as everyone's probably heard the phrase that the person who spends all his time walking around the office with a bunch of empty paper in his hand always looks like the busiest person in the room. So even if it means that whilst you're sat in that leadership meeting, you're jotting a few notes down, you're looking, like you are, and that's the presence bit, is that you're looking involved and you're feeling involved, but just be measured in the response that then comes from that and take in the sort of surroundings. I think what that also does, Haley, is that you immediately build a rapport with the leadership team around you, because actually what you're then conveying is not your own thought out message. You're then also conveying an amalgamation of the thoughts that have been shared by your peers and your leaders. So you're automatically building rapport whilst retaining presence. And, I think those two things combined are a pretty powerful combination.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love that last point that you've just made. I think that's really, really valuable. So I hope everybody, actually, I was just say I hope everybody captured that, but we're going to send this recording to you afterwards. Okay, Ali, if we think about that and that approach, we think about an interview scenario and how you show up in that. How do you think it is best for somebody to what should they consider when preparing for an interview where you may not have that luxury, or what they feel they don't have that luxury, right? Because you feel like you have to just kind of be coming with the answers, with the suggestions, with the ideas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, interview scenarios are always more nerve-wracking because you're suddenly the person that's under the spotlight. So you're right, you don't have the luxury to sit and listen and take on board. You're actually there to, arguably you feel like you're there to perform. And again, a little, anyone who's done anything to do with stage always says that if you get up on the stage, imagine everyone naked, because it automatically makes you feel more comfortable. And, if you walk into an interview room, I think that process starts before you go for the interview. And it comes down to things like, for me, this might sound very, very obvious, but want the job that you're going into, want the company that you're going into, because I think you're automatically more excited. Now, admittedly, I know sometimes it's not entirely possible to be in a position where you're absolutely going for something that you want, but it's a pathway and it's a stepping stone. And I think we all look at certain things, be it, whether it's cars or houses or things like that. We all look at a start point of where we're going. Sometimes we kind of almost forget where those stepping stones are leading. So always go in energized, always go in with a positive attitude. And even simple little things like, look good, feel good, look your best, feel your best. And that doesn't necessarily mean the world is shifted. It doesn't necessarily mean chucking on a shirt and a tie and a suit. Gauge where you're going and how you feel comfortable. Now, if you're not someone who feels comfortable in a suit, then maybe, a corporate bank is not the right place for you to be, because you just won't feel comfortable, right? But make the effort to feel like yourself. And I think you mentioned earlier on, Haley, the word authentic. And I find the word authentic always very, very interesting, because we always tell people when they come in, just be your authentic self. But when you walk into a room and you're not dressed or carrying yourself like you potentially would in any other environment, you are already not your authentic self. So you're automatically kind of picking up a persona. But the flip side to it is that, what is authenticity in a working environment? When you go in for an interview, who is your authentic self? Actually, your authentic self is the person that you're going to be at work. So carry that persona. Your authentic self might not be the person that you're sat having a meal with your friends. We are all authentic in different ways in different environments. So the first stage of that interview is be who you are, but in that environment, not just be who you are. So I think that piece is really important. I think the comfort is really important. Comfort comes through. As it relates to delivery, I'll use the word measured again, Eddie, because I think there's no harm when I used to go into interviews sometimes, and you'd get asked a question and you think that you have to immediately answer the question. And it makes you flat sometimes, because you don't always have all the answers immediately. There is nothing wrong with taking a moment. There is nothing wrong with writing a question down so that you can think it through. There is nothing wrong with asking an interviewer if you don't understand the context that's required in the question. And I think the final part to wrap that initial bit up is take some of the power back.
Yeah.
An interview is not just about the company interviewing you. You are also interviewing them to see whether you actually can work there or want to work there. So when you turn that on its heels a little bit to say, I'm going in with the intention of also finding out whether I want to work here, you go in with a slightly more curious and inquisitive mind, rather than in a position where you feel like you're asking for somebody's approval. And you're not actually in an interview to ask for somebody's approval, because nobody should ever be made to feel like that. My humble opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm furiously nodding along, because you're just hitting so many points that I completely agree with. I think the point, particularly around controlling the narrative, and being as much of you need to be a part of the conversation, commanding some of that, or taking some gravitas for yourself, right? You're in the room for a reason, so give yourself that self-respect. You're not there to be giving yes and no answers. It should be collaborative, especially when we're talking at this level of interview. This is a collaborative experience. And the additional thing to consider, I think, when people are preparing, is that sometimes it doesn't matter how senior a person is. They're not necessarily an interviewing expert. So kind of come with ready to take some control over the conversation if appropriate, but don't feel you just have to be there to do whatever it is. Let them take all the control, I suppose, is to give some of that for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Taz, can I just bring you in here? If thinking about presenting in interviews and all of the things that we've just discussed, with all of your experience in the people and talent space, what do you think people can do to level up their presenting skills in interviews, or things they should consider if they're asked to present in interviews, as so many senior leaders will be asked to do?
There's so much, right? And I'm just conscious of not taking over, because I'm more from my dear childhood friend here, because he's full of wisdom, as we've all noted probably. Look, there are the obvious things which we can go into perhaps in another webinar, do your preparation well. Funnily enough, and this may sound again strangely obvious, but in 30 years of interviewing people, I can't tell you how many times this mistake has been made in my presence. Know your resume, know your career, have examples of when you demonstrated the skills, the competencies, the behaviors that the new employer might be looking for, so that when you are asked, you have 2 or 3 real examples at your fingertips. A couple of other things that I would, again, I'm going to try and avoid the obvious here, because I'm sure we've got a very educated group here. I'm sure, there's some, most people know the obvious, but a couple of things which I found to be real game changing when I do a lot of presenting, not only in interviews, but in training programs and all sorts of things. Get a good night's sleep. Get a good night's sleep the night before. Do not be up all night cramming. These are not your final exams. Do not be up all night cramming. Things like exercise. I mean, they're so brilliant for getting you in the right mind space. If you can get a workout before your interview, go and have a workout before your interview. I always guide sort of executives and candidates to say, try not to think about your interview too much just before the interview. Give your mind a little bit of break to recover, to rest, get a good night's sleep, go and have a workout so that you're not thinking about your interview. You won't forget all of the things you've learned or you've practiced or you've rehearsed. They will come back to you, but you'll be in such a sharper state of mind when you get there to present. The other thing, again, trying to stay away from the obvious suggestions, but the other one which I find people underutilize is your physiology. It's how you use your body, right? And I'll give you some very quick sort of research that's been done. The McGrabian principle, some of you may have heard of, 73855. When you are talking, your words account for 7% of what's taken away, what's received and taken away. 7%, the words you use. And if you think about how much we practice and we rehearse answers to questions, 7%, that's what's going to be taken away. 38% will be the tone that you use. So how you deliver, right? 55% non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication. This is physiology. So if you really want to have a massive impact, don't slouch on your chair. You're not going to present a great energy. Don't walk in with your shoulders slumped. You're not going to present a great energy and have huge impact. Stand up tall, lift your neck up a little bit. These little things seem so almost infantile as I'm saying them out loud to a professional community here. And yet, we see it all the time. We see people come into interviews or at presentations and they're nervous and they're twitching and all of these sorts of things. Use your physiology to your advantage. I really don't want to take over, but you're asking me questions I'm so passionate about. I'd love to talk about it.
I know you are, which is why I know I hadn't planned. I hadn't told you I was going to do that either, but I just knew that you'd have so much to contribute on that, and having had so much experience in it, it only makes sense. But you're right that things can be overlooked because we get so caught up in the research, the rehearsal, however it is that whatever we want to call it. But thank you for that. And I know that's something that you work on during with the Aspire Up program as well. Through that coaching experience with leaders, you talk about peak performance and how to have yourself mentally and physically prepared for these. These situations.
And on that, Haley, if I can just take one moment just to switch topic and tell everybody about our Rockstars program. So if you don't know about this already, Melius Consulting offers free coaching to everybody. It's called Rockstars. You can book time on our website with any of our coaches, myself included. I think Leah's going to get me in a world of trouble and put my meeting link in the chat now. So you can all book meeting time with me.
Go.
We limit the first call to 20 minutes, but feel free to use this service. It's free of charge. It's available to everybody. You can book time directly with any of our coaches, and you can talk to us about anything that's on your mind when it comes to careers. Okay, so I look forward to one-to-ones with you all. Please feel free to use that service. We are here to help.
Thanks, Taz. Ali, I'm going to fly back to you.
Yes.
On the next slide, we're talking about turning up with with presence. So we're still focusing on this presence piece, but I just want to dive into kind of your experience and in your opinion. So in your experience, how much of leadership presence is actually about what we say, how we say it? Now, Taz just mentioned some 38%.
I am so sorry.
It will.
That's my fault. I put you on the spot, Taz. That's my fault. But Ali, tell me about you. So in your experience, when you're in these high stakes meetings, or if you're interviewing a person or being interviewed, how much of the leadership presence is actually about what we say, how we say it?
Everything is probably the simplest way to put it. I think, I often like to relate these things to our personal lives, because I think we walk through life and almost don't necessarily realize the things that we can take from our everyday life into our professional life, because we almost become slightly different people. What I'm 100% with Taz on what he was saying about sort of, verbal and non-verbal cues. You can almost, if we think about it from a personal perspective, how many times have we been in an environment where someone has delivered us a bad news message, but because of the way they delivered it, it just didn't feel as bad, maybe not until about 2 hours later when you actually realize what was said to you.
It lands different, yeah.
It just lands differently, right? And I have to say, this is probably, in this region, there is definitely a sweeter way of kind of almost letting people down that sometimes, which I've got to say that probably many regions could learn from, because sometimes I think some regions are far more brutal than that. But I think when you try and say something in a way that is not necessarily the way that you would ordinarily say it, it automatically looks a little bit forced. And to the point that you were making about when you go into an interview and you're talking about the sort of almost the verbal cues and non-verbal cues, we automatically prepare ourselves for what we think the other person wants to hear. And if you're delivering that in a way where your body language, as Taz was saying, that your body language doesn't marry up with that, if you are trying to deliver a message, for example, where you're saying, I'm incredibly passionate about X, but the only thing that moves is your lips when you use the word passionate, it's very difficult to actually see. And I think this is the thing that, as someone who's been interviewed and interviewed, I saw someone recently in a very, very senior position who was immensely qualified, but she had just learned, and she admitted this afterwards, she had learned to remain very rigid during an interview because she felt that that was the corporate style that needed to be delivered. So even though everything that she presented to me was fantastic, I was like, this is on paper, this is a sort of a 9 out of 10. I couldn't get under the skin of who the person was. What actually motivates you and what drives you. And actually, someone will ask you in an interview what motivates you, and the likelihood is that we'll give some stock answers of the things that do motivate us because they sound good. But actually, when you're interviewing someone, you can automatically see by the way that they balance themselves what actually motivates them. And I can ask someone about risk tomorrow and they can say they're passionate about it, but I can see absolutely that they just do not care about risk because the body movement is different. So I think, we don't look at it on the basis that you're trying to predict what the person wants you to hear. Allow yourself to let some of your personality shine through, because that's the other thing, is that if you don't let your natural personality shine through, those are some very, very long hours to have to be someone that you're not, that you don't want to be, and that you're not comfortable being. I say this with a few years of wisdom now. I've done it myself on many an occasion. But I just wanted to, if I can, Hayley, just on Taz's point and your point, there's no place I don't believe that there's any place in anyone's career from a level of seniority where you shouldn't take help. And for everyone that's on this webinar, this is not a shameless plug for Hayley and Taz, but both of them, it's going to sound like a shameless plug. They didn't ask me to do this, so I'm going to tell you. But the reason I say it is because I also, at moments of my career, got to a point where I thought, I'm senior enough. I don't really need help with this. I'm okay. I'm a guy that can nail interviews. It's fine. But every dynamic is different. And when I came to the region, actually, the kind of the unofficial coaching that Taz didn't know he was giving me, but was giving me, and the help that Haley gave me through some of those moments made me realize that there's never a moment in time where it's not a good idea to bounce those things off. And if you do a practice run with someone that you're comfortable with, you'll soon settle into your motion. Do a practice run with people so that you can feel like you're delivering it. And then also twist it around and look at it through the eyes of the person who's on the other side of the table as well, because I think that's also very important.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ali. And you're right. I know the plug might be unintentional, but as Taz just said, we have these 20-minute sessions. So if you're already on the journey and you want to use your 20-minute session for that to prep, do it. The time is there. It is yours to be used in any way that is most beneficial. Okay, Ali, you mentioned there interviewing a senior person and kind of, what they were saying, not fully aligning up with how it was being perceived. But on the flip side of that, what standout things have you seen? So if people are prepping for interviews or presentations, what are some of the really good things that you've seen that you think, yeah, that was different, that they could do?
Someone did something to me very recently, and in fact, interestingly enough, it is the same person that I just mentioned. Clearly, she impressed me in some ways more as the process went through. We had a discussion around in our first coffee chat before we went through the formal interview process. We'd had a brief discussion just to figure out whether she wanted to join us. We wanted her to join, and I had loosely mentioned the fact that I love anything to do with sports psychology and sports leadership. And it was kind of almost a little bit of a throwaway comment. When she showed up to the first interview, she didn't do it at the beginning, which was quite smart because it would have felt like maybe she was trying to pave the way for a slightly less professional relationship or less professional interview process. At the end of the interview, she took out a book on sports leadership that she really liked. And she just passed it over to me and said, "You mentioned you like sports leadership. If you haven't read this book, I think you'll really enjoy it. This is from me to you." But it was after the interview. And I thought that was really, a lot of these things are well thought out. Mm-hmm. If it was before, I might have, if I was that way inclined, I might have thought, are you sort of trying to butter me up a little bit before the interview? But actually, after the process was done, and I just thought that was a really nice touch, because what it meant to me was she'd listened. She'd listened and tapped into something that actually I thought was a throwaway comment. But in doing that, she also made me realize that that throwaway comment was important to her. It was a shared value all of a sudden. And in and amongst those shared values, we don't all necessarily want to work for people like us, but we do want to work around people who share similar values, similar morals, similar principles. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really, really good point. And the second one is probably, Haley, a little bit more obvious, is when you talked about presenting earlier on, is that, when you present, what I've seen, actually, this was a few years ago now, and someone came in and did a sort of 30, 60, 90-day presentation. The 30, 60, 90-day presentation was so well researched that actually what they'd done was they tried to find places and people that they might have had in common, or might have had some inside knowledge about the business, not in an insider way, but you know what I mean, some more depth to the knowledge, and being able to then deliver and say, look, my 30, 60-day, 90-day plan is based on the fact that I've also sought some insight and some guidance from people who are here in it, feeling it going. And that might be, if you're in the retail industry, for example, you may have gone out and spent, an hour walking around some shops, just doing a little bit of kind of, a little bit of sort of your own sort of customer service piece. So when you walk into an environment, you're sat there saying, well, actually, I think I can X amount your sales by however many it is. How do I know that? It's not a throwaway comment. I spent an hour in some shops, spoke to some customers, and those customers said that if we could do this, this, and this, then we would change things. And those are the kind of things that normally what happens is that people say they're going to do those things after they've got a job. sometimes those small little things that you can do before you go and ask for the job, that really, really impressed me. Someone that came along and said, actually, I've already been out and I've got knowledge of this, not just me saying, I'll do this for you, but actually I know how to do it because I've heard it and I've researched it. So I think those two things really stand out for me.
Yeah, I think they're really, really good examples. And actually, I was going to ask you about this, but we've kind of covered it. But it can be a challenge to build authentic connection and chemistry. There's that word authentic again.
Yeah.
It can be a challenge to build those things during a hiring process. And then towards the end, sometimes that can be the very reason that a hire didn't happen, right? That connection hadn't been made.
Yep.
They couldn't see themselves working with that person. But there are two examples of somebody being able to have chemistry and quickly build an authentic connection by just perhaps thinking a little smarter, listening a little more closely, or digging a little deeper in a different way, but builds a genuine connection. That person can then see themselves working with the other person. They can physically see them in the role. And that is, as you say, shared value. And that
absolutely.
will go far.
Yeah, it really does. And if I can, I'll share these very quickly, Hayley, because I think I'm conscious that I've sort of said all of the great things that I've seen and great things I've done. What I will share is twice that I look back now reflective and I know where I badly got it wrong. And actually just on the subject of what you're saying is that when you talk about the authenticity piece, it's you always have to remind yourself that you are still in that kind of almost formal interview process, that there is an interview ongoing. And there is almost, friendliness breeds familiarity and familiarity breeds contempt kind of thing. And I have found myself in a position where I felt like a relationship had been established at a fourth stage interview down to the last two people. And I was asked a question by the leader who said, why do you think you're the best person for the job? And in and amongst that moment, in my, infinite immature wisdom, I thought the best answer was to look at her and say, because I'm the best at what I do. It did not land well because it was a sweeping generalized statement that suddenly went from humility to almost borderline arrogance. And it also wasn't inherently who I am. So I think in that moment, there's always just balance yourself to your true self without kind of almost overstepping boundaries, because there is still a leadership interview, call it kind of almost respect boundary there. And the flip side to it is I went for another interview many years ago and did hours of preparation. I found a fantastic YouTube video on the CEO of the bank, felt I had so many shared values, and I almost walked in there saying, this is the lady that I want to work for. It's going to be absolutely amazing. But I was so caught up in the shared value proposition that actually when I came away from it thinking, this is mine, we're like the same person in the way that we think. When I came away from it, I realized that actually she'd probably quite happily have gone and had a drink with me or had dinner with me and discussed those things. But I didn't showcase what it was that I could bring to the table for her. She's still a leader. What am I doing to help her, to make her job easier? And that's a lot of it is what leaders want. When they're employing people, they want to know how you're going to make their life easier, not harder. So two bad examples on my part of thinking with the best of intentions, but kind of getting it a little bit wrong.
Yeah, thank you. And there was something you mentioned, I think in the first example, where you kind of delivered a line that you thought would land much better than it did. But it triggered a question that I want to ask, that I think, well, I want to ask for me personally. I'm being a little selfish, but I think other people will find it interesting. Given what you're doing right now and all of the plates that you're spinning, and you're disrupting the industry, within your region, just tell us, as a leader, so we're flipping now, not you as the interviewee, but you as now the leader. What is your leadership philosophy when bringing in new people to your business?
So the first one is when I look at people that I bring in is my primary assessment process, adaptability. I've always believed that adaptability is key to anything that we do, anything that anyone else does. And, I know there are some differing views on transferable skills. For me, it's not just about what you bring to the table right now. It's about what you can bring to the table. But I caveat that with, it's my responsibility as a leader to give you the foundation to be able to deliver that. And so when I talk about adaptability in the environment that I'm now in, and funny enough, Pat and I were talking about this not long ago, is that for me, that startup entrepreneurial part is very new to me. I've lived my life in the corporate sphere. So the kind of almost the spinning the plates and finding out what is more important in terms of people, styles, skills, et cetera, actually it is, can my people adapt to the ever-changing landscape that is the environment that we are going to operate in? And that is above all everything. Because if you can find yourself to a place where you can adapt and you can be, I don't really like the word agile, but I'm going to have to use it not in that sense, but you know what I mean, not in the kind of techie agile sense. No offense to any technologists on the call, but if you can be adaptable, then that means you're curious. That means you're inquisitive. It means you want to find ways to succeed, and that's what I mean by adaptability. And if I look at my leadership philosophy from the perspective of leader to people, I'll try. Stop me, Hayley, if I get on my soapbox about this, because I might do. Leadership is about service. My people are not there to serve me. I am there to serve them. They are there to build the business. Everyone's heard the phrase, recruit smart people so they can tell you what to do, not so that you can tell them what to do. But for me, it's my job is to remove the blockers. I've been blessed and got some very, very good people from the region who have come on board. But I don't think they would have joined if they believed that I was going to sit there and, whip them into shape or all of those things that people say they're going to do. These are accomplished people, as I'm sure everyone on this call is, in their own right. So, seek from your leader what you also need. It's not just about what is needed from the company or from the leader to you. So for me, that's why I say, stop me if I get on my soapbox. I'm really, really passionate about it. I used to say to my team, if I walk out of the door tomorrow and I get hit by a bus, you'll miss me for about 5 minutes, but someone will be in my place and the business will carry on. It won't be better or worse. It'll be different. But if you all walk out tomorrow, what am I going to do? I can't do 400, 500 people's jobs. Today I can't do 6 people's job. So I think for those of us that are stepping into leadership roles, those of you that are interviewing, it's probably the one plea that I have is that, these people who are coming into your teams are looking to you as their leader to help them, to nurture them, to grow them. That's not to say that they're needy. They're not needy. They will do the work themselves. But, our job as leaders is to serve. And that's the way in any given walk of life. That's actually what, whether you look at democracy, whether you look at politics, whether you look at leaders of government, I know they don't all do that, as we've definitely seen over the last few years, but the role is to serve your people. And I think that's something that sometimes gets lost in leadership sometimes.
And that, Ali, will be why you are and continue to be a very successful, and I'm sure much admired leader yourself. That feels like a
Thank
really
you.
good place to
very
end.
kind.
Some really great points there, and leaning into the people side of things, and also some operational risk mitigation. So, so thank you very much. I have nothing else on this point, but if we can just move on to preparing, to the next slide, which is preparing for the interview. As I mentioned at the top of the call, we're not going to talk to this part today, but this is for people on the call to download and take following, along with the other slides and info that we've covered today. So you can immediately implement those or come back and reflect on them at a time that is right. Taz, I'd like to hand to you just to close the call and talk about what is up next for Melius and Aspire Up.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Haley. Before I do that, Zainab's got a question. Leah, you've got your hand up. Is that
Yeah.
why? So the question is, Ali, the question is, I wanted to ask, what are the questions we can ask during an interview as an interviewee, and
Yeah.
in what way can we deliver them?
For me, guys, you want me to take that, Taz? Yeah.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So I think the first, where I normally map this question out is, what do I know about the company? What do I not know about the company? What do I know about the role? And what do I not know about the role? And there'll be many things from a job description, from a company website, from bios, all the rest of it that you will have a little bit of an understanding on. And actually, I know it sounds maybe a little bit kind of almost suck eggsy, but ask the things that you're interested in. Because I think, again, it goes back to that piece of we often like to ask something that's a bit clever or a bit smart, or something that we think the interviewer is going to look at you and think, oh, that was a really smart question. But what will happen is you'll walk away from the interview and feel like actually the things that really mattered to you almost weren't answered. So if you take that piece of what do you want to get out of the interview, not just about getting the job, but what do you want to know, then those questions almost become slightly easy. And for some people, it'll be things like, what's your ethos on growth? What's the development plan for me, for the rest of the team? There's no harm in asking a leader exactly the question that Haley just asked me, is what is your leadership ethos? If someone asked me that tomorrow, I would be bowled over by the fact that someone cared enough because they had that value. So I think genuinely don't be afraid to ask anything. I would caveat that with one thing. I wouldn't suggest asking questions that are pretty evident from any of the research material that you've read. So just be well read about it. And because, sometimes people will not do some research. And I did have someone come in recently and say to me, so can you please tell me what it is your company does? And all I can say to you is the interview lasted about 12 minutes. And not from a bad perspective, but you know what I mean. It's like, if you want something, you'll make the effort for it. But you should also make the effort for you from a questioning perspective. I know that's a bit ambiguous, but if anyone does want some kind of, Taz, I'm happy to share this with and Haley, with you as well. If anyone does want some good questions and some insights from me, I'm happy to list them, but I feel like I might take up the next sort of 20 minutes if I go through them now. So that's the abridged version.
Thanks, Ali.
You're welcome.
We have another question, Ali, so we're keeping you on the spot here.
No, I'm good. I'm good for time. Absolutely.
Yasmin, thank you for your question. I'm going to just read it out to Ali so he can get back to us. In this day of AI is here. How do you as an interviewer differentiate whether the candidate has genuinely prepared or taken an AI download? What a great question. Thank you for that, Yasmin.
You're most welcome. I actually wanted to ask this question because these days it looks as if everybody is just going to AI, and then you really can't differentiate whether the person is genuine or is this something that they've just taken from AI.
I think that is a fantastic question. And we recently had 3 presentations in from people, and the current board spent so much time dissecting which bits were AI and which bits weren't. And you're right. Look, it is incredibly, incredibly difficult. But for a leader's perspective, when you talk about preparation, and again, I say this carefully, leaders also have a responsibility to prepare for interviews. It's not just a one-way street. So, for example, if the presentations that we saw, the way that we managed to sift through whether it was AI driven or whether it was human driven, is that the preparation that we did during that process in terms of asking the right questions, how much knowledge is actually there. Now, we know that we live in a world of AI where AI will be helpful to people, and I for one, makes my life easier in many ways. But to actually understand what it is that's been delivered, to trust and verify what it is that's being delivered. And the way that we do that, the way that we get around that, is asking very, very carefully curated, very carefully pointed questions on content that's been delivered, that then allows us the ability to actually check the depth and the breadth of the understanding of those points that have been made by AI. Because I genuinely have zero objection to someone using AI to research information. I do, however, have an objection to that being regurgitated as this is my content. So if you've used AI and you've learned a load from it, and that learning is correct and you've trusted and verified it, then more power to you, because you say you actually work smarter. But you've got to know it, and it's our job as leaders to verify that process by asking the right questions.
All right, super, Ali. Thank you, Divesh.
Very welcome.
You're very kindly offering to share an opinion, so we're all ears.
Yeah, thank you, Taz, for allowing me time. So I just wanted to share that Ali, I'm not sure if you remember, but Ali took my interview a few months back, and so that was my
Divesh,
first interview.
this could be awkward, right?
This could be
Yeah, definitely.
It's nice. I just saw your name. It's nice to hear from you again, Divesh. I'm slightly nervous about what's being said, but
No, don't be nervous. Please. I just
joking.
wanted to
I'm
share
joking.
that was a fantastic interview which I gave to Ali. And that was my first interview after working a decade in the banking world. So I was a bit nervous in the interview. And when Ali was speaking today, every point what he was mentioning was going through, like whole interview was going through, flashing back in front of my eyes. And probably I could relate where I went wrong, because that was the interview I prepared most. Still, I didn't get through. So this was haunting me from last 3 months, that where I went wrong. And so I really want to thank Melius Consulting for bringing this up, and Ali for your time to bring this up and clarify everything. Really much appreciate your effort.
You're very welcome. And Divesh, I will say, look, we'll catch up for sure. But I will say that you actually did deliver, and I hope I can say this here. You delivered a very, very strong interview. I was slightly. This all feels like it's been slightly set up now, doesn't it? Where
I was going to recommend this for future webinars, is that we always have a guest that, the speaker's not expecting.
I know this is going to be a very interesting conversation, because we always listen one side of the story in this kind of scenarios. But here I was the other side of the table.
Very
Ali, we've got one more question, if we may.
Yeah, go for it.
And that's
I'm good for time.
Erica. And then I think, just to respect everyone's time, we're going to have to wrap it up there. So Ali, Erica, it's over to you and your question.
So essentially what she wanted to ask is, she's been asked in a lot of interview very generic questions like, tell me a little bit about yourself. And it's something that, they ask a lot. So how do you make yourself stand up and make an impression when you're given a generic question like that?
Oh, it's a fantastic question. I have to say, the tell me about yourself question is probably one of my biggest bugbears. I find my hugest respect to any of the leaders that do use this question out there. For me personally, I find it you're throwing something out to someone that is giving them no direction. And I think that makes it very difficult, because at that moment in time, you don't really know what to answer. It's like, should I answer something about my personal self? Should I answer something about my professional career? I'll tell you a response actually that I found worked very well for me a few years ago is, in that scenario, turn the question a little bit background. And my answer was, and someone guided me on this actually, and my answer was, I'm very happy to. Which specific part would you like me to focus on? And in that moment, I mean, don't get me wrong, I had a completely blank face across the other side of the table, because they were not expecting that question to be turned back at them. But it's if when we talked about what question should you ask, and be inquisitive and be curious and don't be afraid to ask a question. This is one of those moments where don't be afraid, because what somebody has asked you is entirely ambiguous. It's a question, it's an answer that could take 5 seconds. It's an answer that could take 5 hours, depending on, what part of your life you decide to focus on. So in that moment, there is no harm in asking the question back to say, and you do it politely and with a great deal of humility, I'd be very happy to answer. Can you just help me with which specific part of my journey you'd like a little bit more detail on? And if you wanted to elaborate further, you could actually ask, would you like that to be about my personal or professional career? And what that does is, that tell me about yourself is kind of almost designed to slightly throw you off, because what leaders want to do is they want to try and figure out where you're going to start. Respectfully, I think some leaders use it because it gives them an out for maybe not necessarily having read and done enough of their own homework on the person. Because as a leader, if we have read through someone's CV, we should know a fair deal about that person. This is the moment where we're actually getting to hear it from them. So the question should be more specific, but that's not always great in reality. So my advice would be, and you do it very politely, ask which specific part of you they would like you to focus on.
Thanks, Ali.
Very
Amazing.
welcome.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. While we've still got him, and I hope you've all sort of taken great value from this. I've learned some stuff, and I was there thinking I know everything about interviewing. Any more questions for Ali? Anything else which anybody would like to share? Maybe a personal experience you've had, something you think will benefit the group, or any other questions for Ali before we wrap up the call? No? Okay, good. I'll just take 1 minute just to remind you all again, Rockstars, free coaching, guys. Some of the questions that we've had today, questions that I commonly get asked. But if you've got anything else on your mind related to your career, whether you're job seeking, whether you are preparing for an interview, whether you're going for a performance review, whether you've got a conflict at work which you'd like some support in addressing, whether you're up for a promotion and you really want to nail that conversation, whatever it is related to your career, feel free, please, to utilize these 20-minute calls with any of the Rockstars coaches. They are all volunteers, by the way. They are all exceptionally knowledgeable and professionals in the HR and career world. So you have access to this resource, and I can vouch for them by telling you that they're better than ChatGPT. I will also tell you about Aspire Up very briefly. Aspire Up is our career program. It's our career coaching program. If you are looking for a new opportunity and you want to take back control of your job search, Aspire Up may be our group program for you. The next cohort is in January. The whole program is designed to give you back control. If you've been in the job market and you've done easy apply and you're not getting responses and you're struggling with recruiters and you're struggling with how to get through to the right people and you just can't find that opportunity, and Ali is laughing because he was there 12 months ago and knows exactly how this feels. We run a group program. The next cohort is in January, as I said. It is. I'm obviously very biased about our program, but I will tell you, hand on heart, this is a program which cuts through the nonsense of job search and gives it to you straight and gives you strategies and systems which actually work. We are not advocates of applying online. It has a 0.08% chance of success. So we don't point people in that direction. We point people in the direction of success. So if you are struggling, feel free to reach out to me, any of my team. We'll talk to you about Aspire Up. Right, Hayley, that's me done.
Yes, and also me. So the last thing to say is just thank you, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate your attendance and staying with us. I know we've ran over, so thank you for sticking around. I hope you found it valuable. We will share with you details of the session that we're doing next month, which is about being ghosted to hired in job search. So super important topic. But thank you all for attending and have a lovely evening.
And thank you, Ali.
Very welcome.
Yes,
Thanks for having
Ali.
me, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.